When I was a kid, my grandmother used to make this dish, kofta and kibbeh. It's basically ground meat with certain Middle Eastern spices, and there's more to it than that, but since you can't taste the real thing right here, right now, just trust me, it's yummy. It wasn't a special occasion dish or anything like that. It was just in the repertoire of delicious things that would come out of her kitchen. It's a Middle Eastern dish, but my grandmother, she's Colombian through and through. Fast forward to 2022, and my mom makes the dish for me. And I started to wonder how these Colombian women, who have never been anywhere near the Middle East, were making this Middle Eastern dish.
Then I go to a taco truck near my house called Tacos Árabes, which means Arab tacos. They are delicious, y'all. I'm talking juicy tacos in a pita instead of a tortilla. It's genius. And this got me thinking, these dishes that we eat from all over the world have these incredibly unique stories. Food is never as simple as we think, because as humans migrate, they bring their food with them, and as cultures mix, so do the culinary traditions.
And so with me and the research I do, it always begins first with people, and then food, and foodways being an expression of the genius of the people.
The genius of people like my grandmother. This, by the way, is Steve Alvarez, my guest today.
I live in Jackson Heights, Queens, originally from Safford, Arizona, and I'm an associate professor of English at St. John's University.
But it's not just English that Steve teaches. He also teaches a taco literacy course. Yes, taco literacy. Where was this when I was in college? A class that teaches how much we can learn about a people through their food and culture. That's where his real passion lies.
Today, Steve and I talk tacos and how special they are. I mean, this dude knows a lot about the culture and history behind food, and trust me when I tell y'all, this episode is gonna make you hungry.
The taco left unexamined is not worth eating. That's an adaptation from Socrates. He would be so proud.
Come on, who else do you know who can bring in Socrates in a conversation about tacos? Steve was incredible to talk to, and after this quick break, we're going to get into the history of tacos, why it's important to embrace the blending of cultures through food, and of course, a little more Socrates. My name is Christopher Rivas, and this is Brown Enough, Stories Between Black and White. Here we go, y'all. I dedicate this episode to my grandma, Maria Carolina Rivera. Love you, mamita. We're back with taco literacy professor Steve Alvarez.
If we were together in Queens right now, where would you take me to get a taco, and what would you order?
Just one taco? Because we have to start at several places. We'd probably start, well, it depends. I think we'd probably have to start in Junction Boulevard and work our way down to 74th and just stay on Roosevelt. And on there's 5 or 6, 7, depending, different regions. But I say there's so many tacos, why just settle for one? But we can settle on an area, and that way you can just stay on the 7 train, and I think you'd be all right. But some of the highlights right now, one of the most famous tacos is a taco de birria. In Birrialandia, this is the beef birria, sort of Tijuana style.
So good, birria.
Yeah, this is the one taken New York by storm. But it actually, it comes from Southern California, made its way over here, but now it's our own thing too. And it started in Queens, that trend at least. So I think that's one of the highlights.
I had birria for the first time in Mexico, in Valle de Guadalupe.
All right. It's different. And Mexico is different for different, regionally the traditions and also the meat. Sometimes people will be, it'll be borrego. Sometimes it'll be chivo. In this case, this is the beef birria. So this one is more specific to Tijuana. But really, it's the same idea of slow cooking the meat. Have it as more like a soup kind of taco, right? Usually it comes in a soup, but this one is a taco that's like just really, just overflowing at the edge with the juices, which is so delicious. But anyway, this is the one, it became kind of the Instagram taco because in California, it was so beautiful to see that thing dipping, and that became like this big trend. And right now, it's probably one of the more popular tacos hitting around the country for terms of taco trends.
I feel like I missed out because I was born and raised in Queens, and if I'm being honest, I don't think I ever had a taco like as a kid. I spent a lot of time eating like Dominican and Colombian food. And I spent so much time in Jackson Heights, and you're telling me all these great tacos are there, but I didn't have that. Was it there, you think, when I was a kid?
Well, I don't know. When were you there, I guess? That would be the question.
I was a kid in the 90s.
Well, there, but not as present as it is now. And really, that's when the Mexican population was really starting to expand after the post-90s. I mean, really to explode, where so much so that the Mexican population was projected to surpass the Dominican and Puerto Rican population
Wow.
in terms of growth. And that's when the food started going through. I mean, I think right now, because what was going on in terms of that generational shift and also people migrating to New York City, is why we're having the Mexican food renaissance we're having. Because it's the next generation. But I should point out, this is also when Mexicanos started arriving in places like North Carolina, Kentucky, and the Midwest. New York City wasn't one of those destinations that Mexicanos were arriving at. But fortunately, they have for the taco situation, and also fortunately for the betterment of the city. You know, I think this is also the more diversity we have in New York City. This is how we learn about people through our neighbors, but also through our food, and that's also makes us such a great culinary place that we live in.
That is what I felt as a child, and I've always said, like, if I have a kid, I want to raise it in that city, because the city taught me more than any book, and the different flavors and the different environments and different people. And so I did not have those tacos as a kid, but I've had them now. You teach a class on taco literacy. What does this mean to you?
I mean, the way I'm talking about tacos right now, it kind of gets to the heart of it. Really thinking about it in terms of first people. And through the people, we understand more about the food. But what happens oftentimes with so-called ethnic food is it becomes decontextualized from the people who produce the food. And this way, you can kind of see sort of like Mexican fast food as being exemplary of this. And I'm thinking of like the stereotypical taco, the default taco is the Taco Bell hard shell taco. That thing. That's the one. That's the mass-produced one that was born in Southern California, but also was appropriated from Mexican folks who were making tacos dorados across the street. And so anyway, that taco is also the one that gets exported around the world in the popular imagination and becomes even the emoji, the taco emoji. Huh. At the same time, though, there's also an understanding that that's just one variety of tacos. And tacos are regional. They move with people. And to really understand the stories about tacos is you have to understand, especially Mexican people, that standardized Taco Bell taco is decontextualized in the history of struggle and also the people who make it. And so with me and the research I do, it always begins first with people, and then food, and foodways being an expression of the genius of the people. What they're dealt with in terms of cards where they live. This is where, for example, Mexican migrants in California started introducing like iceberg lettuce into tacos and cheddar cheese. And so you know, part of this is we start to see as people move, they bring food, the foods change, but the food still carries the dignity of the people who brought the food in the first place. So my taco literacy for me is always first about bringing food, number one, and then the stories related to food and people. And so that's where you can look at a taco, but when you look at a taco deeper and you understand the connection to the people, it's way more delicious.
Hey, beautiful. What cracked your heart open and you said, this is my journey. This is my thing.
Well, I mean, yo soy mexicano. You know, I grew up Mexican from Southwest, and I'm the first one in my family to go to college, and I don't know how to put it. A Mexican food was always there, and sometimes it used to be things I would even be ashamed of. I'm talking like taking bimbolos to school, and kids used to tease me when I was really young. Later on, they got jealous of me because they realized my food is actually really good, and they started trying to trade me their food. I'm like, I don't think so. Don't even front. But then, for me, growing up in Arizona, sometimes it was hard to find things that I could look up to be proud of, as a Mexicano. Because it is the borderlands, it was the place where you were always taught to be ashamed and even to hate yourself. And that was colonized into me, I think, all throughout my education. So much so that where I grew up, I didn't have any Mexican teachers or Mexican-American teachers. It would be people maybe who were the bus driver or the custodian, but never people who looked like me. And that's always a constant reminder, like, we're not good enough to be the front of the classroom. And that stuff gets drilled in. And fortunately enough for me, I was able to go to college, meet some great mentors and things. And long story short, I came to get my PhD in New York City, and I did some research about Mexican folks and after-school program and how they were helping kids with their homework. And the families, mothers especially, used to bring me food all the time. They would bring me tamales, rice, arroz con leche. And it was also, I was a starving grad student, but I loved it. And I didn't catch it at the time, but that food was also saying, I was helping their kids with their homework in English. Going for several years doing this kind of work. And the food was more than like, we see you're hungry. It's more like, thank you for seeing my kid. We see you. I made these with my hands, and this is an expression of care and confianza. It's reciprocal. It's built over time. You're one of us now, right? You're eating with us. And so that lesson wasn't really drilled into me. I moved to Kentucky, and it was the same thing. You help the children of people who are immigrants, and they love you, and they're going to show you they love you with the food. And that's been my experience everywhere I've gone. And when I started teaching this stuff, I was initially trying to teach classes about immigration to mostly white students, and it was rough. It was about immigration to Kentucky until we started going through food. Once we took them to get some tacos, all of a sudden they were so interested in figuring out where those tacos came from. Tacos de cabeza, they didn't even heard of this stuff. They wanted to learn more Spanish. They want to know about corn. I realized, the best way to humanize this was through food, because food was something they already loved, but they had disconnected the people from the food. So here's my job. Let's bring it back together so they can see that you can't love the food if you don't love us.
You're talking about eating as like a spiritual experience, or like a very Buddhist mindset of oneness.
I mean, really, once I started getting more into Mesoamerican mythologies, that's where it was always at. I mean, we're people of the corn. It became first what corn is, where we came from. Corn was initially the cosmovision. It's the thing that links us always, because corn could not come without us, and we could not arrive without corn. And once I started getting into some of these ideas about indigeneity with the land and food as an ecosystem, it does have a kind of oneness to it. But it's a kind of oneness of understanding our place and connection to the land. But it's also a challenge to some of these agroeconomic models of like monocrops and other ways of food exploitation. So we try to take it there, but also understanding there's so many philosophies and ways of thinking about food. It's so mind-boggling. I never realized how deep food was. And I'm so thankful, because it also, coming back to my story, got me to be so proud to be Ser Mexicano. And also realizing, especially when I talk to other kids, young folks, Mexicanos, we can talk about some of these things, because if there's something that we're proud of our food. And sometimes where we're taught to hate ourselves, if we can find those places where we find our strength, it's also where we can see that our families are sometimes that can unite us and bring us back to this culture and the traditions that we carry, even though it's so easy to lose those along the way.
I heard you say that as a kid, when you brought your home food to school, you felt embarrassed. And I resonate with that, seeing my friends, South Asian, Pakistani friends who their moms would make them this food that they've been cooking all day, right? I mean, like, it's incredible, but they're embarrassed. They're embarrassed of the luscious, like, powerful smells that will fill the space that is so much more grand and vibrant than what you can get in any cafeteria. And how they had to come to learn to love that smell, love that vibrancy, love those flavors again, because assimilation and America will want to strip it from its roots, from its home, from its love.
I agree. That kind of food shaming is not something that's unique to what I experience. Other people of color experience this too. And in fact, the other day in class, we talked about this, where students were breaking up into groups and talking about food shaming. And one young woman from Jackson Heights, same thing. She was talking about the smell of cumin that would sort of emanate around the class. And I asked her, did anyone ever say it bothered them? And she said, well, no, but in my mind, I thought I heard them say it bothered me. It's this kind of like double thing that we do about what we think they're going to say, but it's more self-conscious, and the extra anxiety that we have just about our food. And so another student was saying, yeah, same thing happened to me, so I begged my mom to give me Lunchables. Those mass-produced, like, tasteless, like, I'm talking about little pieces of cheese.
Tasteless, smellless.
Yeah, right. But they're, like, packaged nicely. I guess they are packaged nice for COVID or something. I don't know, right? But anyway, and then I remember asking, you wanted that, and here you had this healthy, nutritious food that was made by your mom, but you wanted that because you wanted to fit in, and you knew it wasn't delicious too, right? But there is that pressure, like, why do I want to stand out, especially when you're very young? But as she pointed out, and as you said too, that she came to love it. She came to say, like, no, this is my mom made this food for me. And it's, whatever that is that turns us at that direction. But it's whatever the Lunchable represents in this. I think that's the danger. If we got to steer him back, bring him back from the Lunchable. Even though the Lunchable's very American, no doubt.
Yeah. So this whole inspiration for this episode came from this LA taco that I love, Tacos Árabes. Do you know this kind of taco?
Oh, yeah.
Can you describe the components of Tacos Árabes?
I think the best way I could describe it is more like you would have the idea of like a pita taco. What a beautiful thing that is. It's just basically everything that's a taco, but a little bit bigger with a nice tortilla and a beautiful, really tasty, like a chipotle barbecue sauce. Usually for the Mexican folks, we'll use pork. Traditionally, historically, I think the taco árabe might have been more lamb as well. But I think the more foundational way we think about it now is pork, and also thinking later on it becomes like the so-called grandfather of the taco al pastor with the rotisserie style. But
I love the tortilla. It feels like a hug on like perfectly cooked meat.
That's a good tortilla is like a nice hug. I like that. Yeah, absolutely.
Because a bad tortilla gets it disappears too quick. You know,
Oh,
you need the
that's better.
hug. You need the to be held.
I want to be held close. and
Yeah.
tight.
So that's what I love about it is the hug quality, but also the meeting of cultures, right? Because I know the pita is not traditionally, or in my opinion, when I first had this taco, the pita was not traditionally what I associated with any Mexican taco. And I associated all masa, right? Corn, flour, maybe even a burrito, which is still thinner. So I looked up the history of these tacos. Do you think you can walk us through it?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, you're exactly right. It has well, as every taco, it has layers. And this one's kind of interesting because you can start first with the tortilla, and I think that's probably the first layer. But the same kind of story as people move, they bring their food, and over time, the foods mix across generations. They take on their own meaning. They become their own thing. And so this could be like the Middle Eastern contribution to what we understand as taco culture in Mexico.
What time period did Middle Eastern folks immigrate to Mexico? And why'd they go there?
Sure. I think at this time, the larger situation was there was a genocide that was happening in Armenia, in the Levant. This was, I think, the beginning of the 20th century. And kind of like we stand right now, about 100 years later, it was mass migration of people who were starving. There was war. And as they were moving, of course, they were bringing their foods. Well, there was also a significant amount of people that moved to South America. So a lot of Colombian folks who had roots from, let's say, Turkey and the Levant. A lot of folks from Syria and Iraq moved to Mexico. Carlos Slim, the wealthiest man in Mexico, his family came from, I believe, the Levant, Lebanon area. Sama Hayek is a Turkish name. So, I mean, there's a lot of folks who came from the Middle East and also affected, a lot of folks who came from the elite as well. So they also brought like elements of their culture. Some people who were able to make, bring restaurants and the like. Well, there was a significant amount of folks who made their way to Puebla. So the story goes. And in Puebla, some folks say the folks came from Syria. Other folks say from Iraq. But I want to say somewhere in the general Middle East and Levant, we'll just say in general. The story is one family was specializing in making their bread. And another family had the meat and was slicing it on the rotisserie, what we understand is like the shawarma kind of style, which you would recognize as al pastor. But also if you go to, let's say, a kebab place or a Turkish place, you'd recognize it very similar.
You see the same thing,
the rotisserie meat. Same thing. So that came with the immigrants too. So it was the barbecue technology, and it was also bringing it back. Basically, it was the same thing. Like, as you said before, like there's nothing quite like the warm hug of like fresh meat and something that's wrapped up, whether it's a dumpling or whether it's anything, bread, I don't care, pizza, I don't care. And so the story is, as they were, the two families came together to make this union of this taco. I believe this is in the show Taco Chronicles, if y'all want to check this one out. A woman who was walking by saw what was going on. She didn't know what to call it. So she said, give me one of those tacos árabes.
In the literacy of a taco, how do you teach people to read what possible religion it comes from, or the food they had access to, or their class? Like, how does that reading begin?
Well, first I would say there's two ways. There's the food and language, and there's the food as it exists as a thing in front of you. So on one hand, like reading the thing in front of you would mean to do some like close observation and giving some really attentive detail. I mean, on one hand, there's a beautiful taco, you want to eat it, but it's asks you to kind of study it, at least look at it, maybe ask a few questions. This is like the difference of, say, like going to a restaurant and doing a little bit of research before you go there, or even researching the food before you eat it. But looking at the tortilla, is it flour? Is it corn? What does that mean in terms of going off on history? That's one thing. Okay. On the other side, reading it as language, because language and food go together because they're also parts of the genius expression of human beings and people. So with the food, let's say, for example, chocolate, also quite delicious. Chocolate comes from the Nahuatl chocolato. So the root of the word and where it comes from has Aztec roots, or roots from Nahuatl. And so when we think about roots of words, sometimes we think about roots that come from Europe, from Latin, and from Greek. But there's words for foods that come from the hemisphere here, and those roots are indigenous. And so even beginning with the language itself, we can trace where the roots of the words go to, and also see where, for example, chili peppers begin first in Mexico and find their way in cuisines all over the world. I mean, think of all the delicious food that has such spicy chili peppers and what they would be without chili peppers. Sichuan food or Indian food. And those peppers first come from this hemisphere. So part of what's really beautiful about this is when you trace food into language, you can also see how it moves, but it's always predicated first on people.
The way Steve talks about paying attention to your food makes me feel guilty for how often I just scarf something down on my way to or from somewhere. But there is one experience I can think of that feels related. Silent retreats. I've done a couple of these, and I gotta say, eating can be one of the most exciting parts of the day when you are not speaking. You're so attentive to everything that once the food hits your mouth, wow, you can't help but think about the little details in every single morsel you eat. Now, I don't eat with that much intention every day because, like all of us, I know we all have a bunch of shit to do. But eating is a very important part of our day. So maybe it's worth it to take just an extra minute, hell, maybe just a second, to acknowledge the people whose culture made that food. All right, y'all, we're going to take a little break. And when we get back, Steve and I dive into how exactly Arabic food made its way into Latin America. We're back with taco literacy expert Steve Alvarez. So I told you all about that dish my grandma made. It is what inspired me to do this episode about tacos and blended food traditions. I wanted to tell Steve about the dish, find out if he'd ever heard of Latin American folks like my grandma making Arabic dishes.
When I was a kid, my Jackson Heights grandma, she used to cook, she's Colombian, she used to cook kafta and kibe. And this is like ground meat mashed together with different spices. And I didn't think anything of it as a kid, and I now know it is a Middle Eastern dish. Like I said, my grandma's from Colombia. How do you think she learned this dish? I never got to ask her, rest her soul, but how do you think she came to learn it?
Oh my gosh! Well, this history of this one is so similar. Start thinking about actually tacos árabes, because it actually, I think, theoretically comes with the same group of people that were bringing the same kind of food, the same kind of technology. So they're bringing that. But you got to even go back further in this, because cinnamon, raisins, ground meat, or things that are kind of green olives as well, are things that are kind of hallmark for Spanish food. But that goes back even further, because that has to do with the Muslim occupation of Spain. So this is where, for example, like my last name Alvarez has some like Arabic roots from way back when. And so you can see like way back before, Spanish people were already mixed anyway. They were mixed with religion. There was Jewish folks too. The elements of these Jewish foodways and things, and Arab foodways, and so European foodways or whatever. And they all Christian so-called. And they moved into Americas. And then with this, they start mixing together. But also then you have different waves of people who are coming from the Middle East as well and bringing some of those similar flavors. They arrive in Colombia. They arrive in Brazil. They arrive all over the Americas. I believe Garcia Marquez's family, Shakira's family as well. And so what it is folks bring their food too, and the food becomes a part of the culture. And with part of the culture, sometimes it ends up changing just a little bit, but there's still the hallmarks where you can follow back with the language, and you can also see through the food a little bit of the history, because you may see the food itself, but the food will tell you more about the people and how it got there. Well, put it this way. Sometimes there's a search for people trying to find so-called authentic, whatever that is. I think that's a fruitless task. Instead of trying to find the origin trying to be something that's unique, if we look about the beauty of mixture and that what's right in front of us, we can always see, like, who cares where it came from? Just know that it's here. Know it came from somewhere, and that story is complicated, but also be able to appreciate diversity rather than trying to find some kind of purity. Because I think if you search for purity, you fall into the same trap of people who are trying to fall into like elements of white supremacy and some bullshit like that. I wouldn't get away with that. No way.
Beauty of mixture.
Yeah.
Take that home at the end of the day.
That's right.
Food can reveal to you the delusion of purity.
Oof. I mean, I think whatever idea what it could be a pure food in general is complicated. It would be more like a theoretical thing. And to say that, like, because it has to do, like, if somebody says, oh, an authentic taco has to be, like, at a place where it's, like, it costs $2, and maybe they're playing a novella on the screen, and nobody's speaking English, right? But there's a kind of authenticity that is even the Taco Bell taco, because it's born and bred in the United States, and it's its own thing, too. I mean, to be able to appreciate them at their different levels, but also understand that there's definitely one that has... there's one that comes with an army and of advertising and high-end industry behind it, and there's one that comes from people, and sometimes it's people you can even talk to while they make your taco.
I was just in the Dominican Republic, and I saw a huge Chinatown in Santo Domingo, right? I got some great fried rice with tostones. And when I was a kid, pretty sure in Jackson Heights, a spot that's still there. I used to go to a Cuban Chinese spot, and I remember these Chinese cats was speaking better Spanish than I could ever speak, making incredible like wonton soup slash vaca frita at the same time. And so we know that there's the Middle Eastern influence. What about other influences in Latin America?
Definitely. I mean, well, like you said, Chinese folks have gone all over the world. There's definitely that part as well. You think about just all the different waves of migration. For example, Italian folks that came to Argentina and Chile and Uruguay as well. The Jewish folks too.
The Italian folks taught Argentinians because me and my lady on the 26th of every month, we make gnocchi, which is an Argentinian tradition because it's towards the end of the month and it's low on, rent's coming up. So it's one of the cheaper, more filling things to make. And we had read that came from Italy for them.
Huh, I didn't know that. I mean, even that, things like this where you see where different folks bring different traditions and they may even carry that tradition over and may not even need to sometimes, but they do it more just out of practice. How put it this way, that the waves of migration haven't stopped. They're still going. Right now, probably some of the more profound mixing that's happening in Mexico are the Haitian migrants and the plight they have on the border, but also places like Tijuana and the kind of the food that's emerging there by necessity. And these are folks who are refugees. And, to think about migration on one hand is to think, of course, it's beautiful. The mixture is great, but there's also the harsh side too, that are people who are being pushed out of violence, and they have to make do. And it's the same story that happened to the folks from the Levant 100 years ago. It's happening to folks in Syria now. I'm talking like little kids and families going into boats to try to cross the water and so on in the Mediterranean. So these are folks in dire straits, and I believe right now it's the most migrants in world history since the Second World War. So these are really, really bad times, but folks are resilient with their food. There's stories of folks, enslaved Africans, who brought the seeds of okra in their hair, knowing that these were the things that were going to sustain them as they moved to the other side, wherever they were going to go. And so the food can give us hope. The food can give us a sense of liberation when we unify in this way, but also really understanding that, I don't know, I guess the bigger picture for me is that it always comes down to people. And hopefully, if you get to the point of where people are at the first part, we can see that all these elements of food, from our farming to the way we cook and everything else, is an expression of what makes us great as human beings.
There's a fabulous Brazilian restaurant in downtown LA called Wood Spoon. And the founder, calls it Wood Spoon because she always says, right now, there are billions of people sowing love with a wood spoon. Billions of people using the wood spoon to give their love and to nourish with love. And I see a lot of that in this single taco.
I like that.
Why do you think people, maybe especially Americans, love tacos so much? You said a lot of it, but like if you had to sum it up.
Well, I always say like, wow, I wish they would love us as much as they love tacos. But you can't love the tacos if you don't love us.
Amen.
But number one is because they're delicious. They're appealing because they're a food that you can eat standing up with your hand. They kind of go good with everything. Sometimes people put more emphasis on what's in the taco, but to really get to the fundamentals, it has to be the tortillas, number one. You got to have a good tortilla. You can you can put a lot of good stuff in a solid tortilla, but if the tortilla is no good, you're gonna have problems. And then also like a fresh salsa and so on. But I guess for me, I think folks love tacos because taco is just meant to be loved. That's just all there is. Very scientific.
What is your favorite taco?
I get asked this a lot, and I guess, my family, we come from Sonora, Sinaloa, so we're norteños, like cowboys, from that area. My father's family comes from Sinaloa, and there's this kind of pork, it's kind of like vinegar chili pork called chilorio, and I really love that. And that's usually on a flour tortilla with a little bit of fried pinto beans, and then you put the chilorio on it, and it's, similar to a little bit like birria, but a little bit more tangy. But that's one I like. Some folks don't like it because it's tangy, but it's one that reminds me of food growing up.
When I went to Oaxaca pretty recently, I was sort of transformed because of their pride in their food. Everywhere from, we did Oaxaca City to the beach to the mountains, there was such pride in their land and in their food. And their pride injected the food with something you cannot cook it in, and
I tasted that pride. And I think what I hope to sort of take away from this conversation is sitting with food, sitting with the culture it came from, the stories it came from, the love it came from, and finding that pride so it can affect me as well. Have you had an experience recently where you stumbled into a cross-cultured food, that you didn't know about?
Well, I think it happens especially in the classes I teach. So I'm teaching taco literacy right now, but I also ask students to do projects where they focus on their foodways and their families. So this has always been really interesting because students bring in things from their families at class and talk about some of their traditions. And the other day was kind of interesting because one student was speaking about her tradition, she's Italian American, of sauce in her family, trying to figure out where that family recipe came from because she realized that her grandmother is not Italian, but her grandmother is the one who has a tradition for this sauce. And it was sort of this thing where she married an Italian guy, so she had to learn how to make the sauce of her mother-in-law. Anyway, so it's getting so interesting. We started asking these questions about where this sauce came from, and then she also called it gravy, which I thought was kind of interesting. In these classes, we have these moments because the classes are in St. John's. We're in Queens. They're diverse, like faces of Queens, and everybody has their own food traditions, and they bring these in. And so that was, for a student, she's white. For her to think like, oh, wait, there's this part about my ethnicity for me to be able to connect to and learn, and actually even stuff that's actually going to happen not in English for me to recover something. There's a sense of reclaiming something that's lost that I think is so valuable. And then to hear where other students who are coming from, especially for her to hear the student who really wanted Lunchables. I mean, I can see the puzzled look on her face, like, why wouldn't you not want your family's food? And so to see them have conversations is really beautiful. I love to go through Mexican food because I love to bring in my own biography and talk about how important it was for me to find that and be able to reclaim those aspects of my identity. And so, once we start getting the food, though, it becomes a really cool moments. In a better world right now, I'm usually bringing food to class, but right now they won't let me because of COVID stuff. But what I will say, when I do bring food to class, things like tamales and sometimes tacos, my class evaluations go through the roof. So, there you go.
Most liked teacher, easily. What do you think the next trend in tacos is going to be? Predict it now.
I think right now what's kind of pretty popular is mariscos, so seafood, particularly the stuff that's coming from Sinaloa or Tijuana. And so this has been like a really big tradition in the Southwest and catching on, but I think I see that turning more to New York. And so what I hope would be really cool is if we get some like New York oyster mariscos that's going to happen over here of like, because you can imagine some like Long Island. Oh, I don't know anything. I think mariscos is going to be where it's at, and it's already happening. There's some really cool places that are in Queens too that are doing some really great stuff. But people who are doing stuff with like swordfish tacos.
Literally had a swordfish taco 2 nights ago.
Yeah, octopus tacos, oh my gosh. So this stuff is so delicious, and I think that's going to be something that, especially for New Yorkers, to catch another aspect of Mexican identity through elements of like Mexican seafood, which is also its own kind of really cool food tradition.
Selfishly, do you have a favorite LA taco spot?
Oh man,
you can top 3 me. You can give me a 1.
I guess I gotta go always LA taco, man. Like hold on, man.
Don't rush.
No, I gotta think about it. I might have to go to my map.
This is where I'm going after work.
Oh man, I'm gonna have to go to my map here because it's been there for I think this place called Guisados.
Oh, Guisados is fire. Yeah.
Yeah, that place, because I remember they had one little taco sampler that was really great, but everything there was so incredible. I just remember being like very, very happy. Really, really happy.
Next time you come back, I'm gonna take you to a spot called Tire Shop.
All right.
Tire Shop is my spot. And
another place,
yeah,
Burritos La Palma.
Oh,
Burritos
yeah, I've had
La
that
Palma.
too. So, I mean,
Yeah.
I'm pretty into this. And my lady and I, we have we hit a taco joint a week.
Shoot.
Yeah, we have a list going. I've had Burritos La Palma. And also another spot is Tacos Villa Costa.
I think I might,
That's a stand. That's a stand in Highland Park. So whoever's listening, hit them up.
Mariscos Jalisco, I remember, was the truck, right?
I know that truck too, yeah.
Yeah, that one I remember. So those are the mariscos that are slowly catching on over here. But that truck, oh man. I remember I haven't been in LA for a while, but I had my little taco tour too, and I remember being at that place and also being so happy. Like, oh, that was a nice place. That was a good day. That was a good day.
Steve, thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. I'm really excited. This is really cool. It's fun. I love talking about tacos with people.
Thank you again to Steve for coming through, and thank you for listening. This conversation with Steve is so special to me because it showed the depth of the connection between humanity and the food we eat. I really love this episode, and I hope you took away something meaningful that you can remember next time you're eating some food from a culture that isn't your own, especially if it's some tacos. Shit, I'm gonna go get some tacos right now. Maybe guisados. Nah. Maybe El Ruso. Nah. Probably tacos via Corona. Anyway, I'll figure it out. It's LA. I'm hungry. I'll see y'all next week. Peace. Next on Brown Enough?
If you can sum it up in a sentence, the DR celebrates its independence from Haiti, not from Spain. Why do you think that is?
Anti-Blackness.
Brown Enough is a production of Stitcher. It's created and hosted by me, Christopher Rivas, and I'm also an executive producer. This episode was produced by Baudelaire. Our team includes producer Manolo Morales, senior producer Abigail Keel, technical director Casey Holford, production assistant Gabrielle Gladney, and executive producer Camille Stanley. Original music by Casey Holford. Special thanks to Kevin Tidmarsh. Carlos E. Hernandez of Ikigai Management is also an executive producer of Brown Enough. And don't forget to subscribe, y'all, or follow Brown Enough so you never miss an episode. And if you got a minute, leave us a review. A nice one. It goes a long way. Thanks.
Witness Docs from Stitcher.